Hi guys, so I finished typing out my notes today for this book, which was just as good as I thought it would be, just from knowing that it's about the Holocaust. So this book follows the story of Yannick Gruner, a 10-year-old boy who was deported into his first concentration camp at 13. So just a little disclaimer, there were a lot of characters in this book just because of how much he moved around. He moved around to 10 different concentration camps in the span of like 6 years. So the main characters that are really worth mentioning are Yannick Jacob Gruner, Oscar and Mina Gruner, Uncle Mosh, Amon Goeth, I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm probably going to say it wrong every time. He's a commander at one of the camps. And Fred, Yannick's really only true, genuine friend he makes in the camps. So I decided that I wanted to try something new with this book because it's in chapters and it's not very big. It's 30 chapters. It's for grade school students, and each chapter is like 4 to 5 pages long. So I really just took the main point from each chapter, and the chapters that have really pivotal moments I didn't include, or I just put. Let's see, what did I write? I wrote, yeah, there's a major event in this chapter that I won't expose. So let's just jump right in, okay? So this book takes place in Poland and Germany between the years 1939 and 1945. Is when the war ended in 1945. So in chapter 1, the book begins with Yannick's father and his uncle arguing about politics, and so to distract them from the politics, Yannick's mom, Mina, tells him to go get his handmade projector and to put on a puppet show. And halfway through the puppet show, it comes across the radio that the Germans had invaded Poland, and they've gotten to Krakow, which is where he lives. I wrote down a quote, page 6, so on page 6 it says, "It was too late. The Germans were here. If I had only known what I know now, I would have run. I wouldn't have stopped to pack a bag or say goodbye to my friends, or even to unplug my projector. None of us would have. We would have run for the woods outside of town and never looked back. But we didn't. We just sat there in my family's flat, listening to the radio and watching the sky over Krakow turn black as the Germans came to kill us." Alright, so that's already setting the tone. I mean, this book's about the Holocaust. You know it's not going to be a uplifting book, unfortunately. So in chapter 2, let's move right along to chapter 2. There are new rules established by the Germans, and those new rules are no cinema, no library, no parks, no swimming pools. They can't walk on main streets anymore, and they must be inside by 9 p.m. No exceptions. Anyone caught breaking the new law will be shot on contact. That's about it for chapter 2. Chapter 3 is the Germans start to build a wall around the town that he lives in, the town Yannick lives in. So I wrote down pages 15 through 17, so that says, all the Poles there who weren't Jews had to move out, and all the Jews who lived outside the ghetto in Krakow had to move in. And watch them moving in, wave after wave of them. Huge groups of Jews climbing out of trucks and going down Lawaska Street. There were men and women and children, families, teenagers, grandparents. They all wore Star of David armbands like us. Some of them wore the uniforms of the jobs they had, too. Policemen, postmen, nurses, trolley conductors. There were no jobs for Jews anymore, no jobs besides cleaning the toilets of German soldiers. My father and uncle had lost their jobs, had their inventory seized by the Nazis, just as Uncle Mosh said they would. The new Jews carried their luggage with them, everything they owned in the world, and they looked around with big, worried eyes at the buildings and streets of their new home. They were probably hoping that things would be better here than wherever it was they came from. But everything that happened over the last year had taught us that things always got worse. So, chapter 4, these little summaries of each chapter are very short because chapters weren't very long. So, in chapter 4, one of Yannick's uncles, Uncle Abraham, was allowed to keep a shop to make bread for the German soldiers, and then at night he was secretly making it and giving it out. to his friends and families so they could sell it for extra money, since food had begun to get rationed out. The more money you had, the more food you could buy. So that's it for chapter 4. In chapter 5, this is 1942. The Gruner's flat was invaded by Germans and special Jewish police appointed by Nazis called capos. In this chapter, all of their valuables were taken, and a bunch of families were loaded into the houses. So, chapter 6, Yannick is 13 years old, and the Judenrat calls a ghetto-wide meeting and tells the remaining people that the Germans want more Jews. He suggests that the parents give their children. And at this point, I was really confused. So we're just going to read page 42. It's actually 41. Okay, 40 and 41, so. Others in the crowd shouted angrily that they were starving. I nodded, feeling my own hunger pangs. If we prove ourselves useful to the German war effort, they will take fewer of us away. They will keep us here and keep us alive, the director said. We must therefore think carefully about who we send anyway and who remains. We must give them those who cannot work. More murmuring among the crowd. Who can he mean? I asked my father. Everyone in the ghetto worked. Even my mother had been taken to the factories when she was caught out on the streets. My friends, the director said, I must reach out my arms and beg. Mothers and fathers, give me your children. Okay, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, if you wanted the Germans to leave you alone, wouldn't you send them your strongest workers? I mean, in this case with the Holocaust, it doesn't matter, they were going to be killed either way, just because the Germans felt like it. But to me, in a logical sense, that if they wanted good workers, you wouldn't send children whose bodies would give out 2 times faster than an adult body would. You would send them the men, the strongest men, and the strongest women. I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. So we'll just move on to chapter... Actually, no. There's one more thing I put down for this chapter. In chapter 6, after this, they all go back to their houses, and there is a makeshift bar mitzvah held for Yannick in the basement? Nope. The basement of an abandoned building. I'm going to read this page. I like this. It's like the crossing of Yannick into a man from a boy. So the stairs creaked behind us, and we all turned. My heart was in my throat. If we were caught down here together with the Torah in hand, I would never become a man. I would be shot dead on sight. But the shoes we saw coming down were not the glistening boots of an SS officer. They were the brown leather soles of Mr. Tatarka? From down the hall. Now we are 10 men, my father whispered. He smiled at me. And soon we shall be 11. I'm sorry we did not have more time for your studies, Yannick. Just do your best. The Torah scrolls were taken out and unrolled. Sorry, I had to sneeze. So I could read from them. My Hebrew was rough. Before the Nazis, I would have been at the synagogue once or twice a week ahead of time, practicing for this. But of course, that wasn't possible now. I muddled through, and if God or man heard anything amiss, neither of them called me on it. When I was finished, my father chanted a blessing over me in the place of a rabbi who had been killed by the Germans. He prayed in Hebrew and spoke in Polish. Yannick, my son, he said, looking at me solemnly, you are a man now, with all the duties of an adult under Jewish law. You are now responsible for your own sins, but also for your own goodness. Remember what the Talmud teaches. Life is but a river. It has no beginning, no middle, no end. All we are worth, is what we do while we float upon it. How we treat our fellow man. Remember this, and a good man you will be. And then his uncle says, Oscar and his river. Uncle Mosh said, you should talk some sense into him now that you're a man, Yannick. The man who falls asleep on the river drowns. I don't know, I really like that for some reason. Like, the uncle, he's a realist. He's not afraid to say, like, if the Germans take over, we are most likely all going to die. And that's, for the most part, what happened. Alright, chapter 7, page 50. Alright, I'm trying to keep my dogs away from my birds. On page 50 it says, I was terrified just like they were, but I wasn't going to cry. I was a man now, I reminded myself. Like, okay, hold on, real talk for a second. It's okay to cry. If you're a man, it's okay to cry. It's okay to cry for your woman. It's okay to cry for your little boy. It's okay to cry. Crying since the day you were born has been nothing but a sign that you are alive. Crying is not a weakness. It's natural. You cry when you're sad. You cry when you're happy. If you're me, you cry when you're angry and you look weak. You cry. Okay, everybody cries. It's okay. No one expects you not to cry. At least I don't. If you want to cry, cry. I'll not support you. It's better to feel your emotions fully than to force them to stop and then just never be able to move out of the funk they put you in. Okay, so, and then in this chapter, 7,000 Jews were being sent to a resettlement camp. In chapter 8, there's a major event that I won't expose, so let's move on just to chapter 9. Dachau concentration camp, 1942 and 43. So Yannick is finally taken to his first concentration camp at the age of 13. This little scene reminded me of The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, so I also recommend that book and movie too. Alright, let me calm down my bird. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Where are we? Page 64, 65. This is basically where Yannick is talking about he's finally a prisoner, but he was really a prisoner since the day the Germans invaded. I'm not going to read too many more quotes from my book just because it'll take a long time. I just want to talk about what happened in each chapter. So that was chapter 9, right? Okay, chapter 10. Yannick has been in the concentration camps for a while now, and he's sent back to his hometown to clean up the Jewish filth. And ironically, the place where he's sent to clean is his childhood home. In that same chapter, chapter 10, 19 Jews were killed in the few hours that they were gone cleaning the city, and they had been killed for no more than existing. Like, that was the only reason they were killed, is because they existed. Chapter 11 is avoiding another major event. Chapter 12, Yannick found a loose floorboard in the floor of their bunker, so he convinced 2 of his friends to hide there, and they cut it close when the commandant of the camp came in, just to see that everybody had went to roll call, and they just lied and said they were there on a work detail, and then they hurried back to the main square of the camp. And they were only hiding there so they could avoid work and regain their strength, that way they wouldn't be killed. Oh, in chapter 13, the next chapter, Yannick gets moved to the, I cannot pronounce this for the life of me, Mylizika salt mine. I'll be right back, sorry. I'm so sorry about that, my bird was like flipping out. Okay, what chapter were we on? Chapter 13, the salt mines. Okay, there Yannick sees the old Jewish cop that he saw invading their house and taking all their stuff. Later, the same cop is found dead. His head has been bashed in with a shovel, and salt is rubbed in all his wounds. Chapter 14, Yannick is moved again to, I cannot pronounce these, to save my life. Trisbenia concentration camp in 1944. Some of these quotes I actually really like, so I might just see which ones they are, because I really like some of the ones, so that's why obviously I liked all of them. I wouldn't have put them down for quotes. Oh yeah, this is the one I like, so I will read this one. I worked all day moving piles of rocks back and forth, digging holes 6 feet deep, and then filling them back in again. I ate watery broth and week-old bread once a night. I passed out on a wooden pallet with no mattresses or pillows or blankets. I was an animal to them, a pack mule. But beasts were never treated so poorly. Working animals were expensive. They had value. I was a Jew. We were lower than animals. They could kill as many of us as they wanted, and there would always be another trainload of us to take our place. And that's true. Unfortunately, it's so true. Alright, he gets moved again in chapter 15 to Birkenau. This is a death camp. That's the most interesting thing that happens in chapter 15. Chapter 16 also takes place in Birkenau concentration camp in 1944 to 45. All of the Jews were marched into a gas chamber, and instead of gas, I came out of the shower heads, it was freezing cold water, and they got to take their first shower for the first time in like 3 years. Okay, in chapter 17 is where Genek is assigned his number, which is B-3087, which conveniently gives the title of the book, Prisoner B-3087. After they are shuffled into their bunks, a quick bar mitzvah is held for a boy that was 13, like Genek was the first time he was sent to a concentration camp. Page 135. It says, the ceremony was so fast we couldn't... No, that's not what it says. I'm sorry. The ceremony was fast so we wouldn't be caught. When it was over, all the men whispered, Mazel Tov, and climbed back into their shelves. I went up to the boy and pressed the wooden horse into his hands, the only present I could give him. The boy looked at me with big, round eyes. Had I ever been so young? We are alive, I told him. We are alive, and that is all that matters. We cannot let them tear us from the pages of the world. I said it as much for me as for him. I said it in memory of Uncle Mosh, and my mother and father, and my aunts and other uncles and cousins. The Nazis had put me in a gas chamber. I had thought I was dead, but I was alive. I was a new man that day, just like the bar mitzvah boy. I was a new man, and I was going to survive. Wow. Chapter 18, the most interesting thing that happens is there's a prison break, and they're out all night searching for them. And when they bring the people back that ran away, they had beaten them nearly to death. They kept them alive so they could show them off as, like, to the other prisoners, like, if you do this, this is what will happen to you, and then they shot them. And they had the other prisoners carry away the dead bodies as an extra reminder of don't break the rules. And chapter 18 is the prison break. Chapter 19, Genek was moved again, but this time to Auschwitz, which, to my knowledge, is the most lethal camp. I might be wrong, but that's what I learned in school. Auschwitz was the biggest death camp that I know existed. On the way into the gate to Auschwitz, it says, we passed under the front gates of Auschwitz where the German words, Arbeit macht frei, were written above the gate. I knew enough German to translate it. Work makes you free. A smiling SS guard told us a very different story as we passed. You come in through the front gate, he said, but the only way out is through the chimney. I looked up with the new prisoners to the tops of the brick chimneys where a thick black smoke poured out into the blue-white sky, the crematorium. Little flecks of gray fluttered down all around us, collecting on puddles of water in the yard. I watched a little girl in a blue dress catch one on her tongue like snow. That's disgusting. I didn't have the heart to tell her it was the ashes of the people who had come before us. That's so sad. Like, she has no idea what she just was forced into, and that breaks my heart. Alright. Our next chapter should be 20, which means we have 10 chapters left. This is where he meets Fred. In chapter 20, he meets Fred. Also, in chapter 21 is where they start to get close. Okay. So, the death march happens, chapter 21. So I have kind of a bit wrote down for this one, more than I have for the other ones. So Genek met Fred, who was the first person to genuinely be nice to him. He let Fred get close to him despite his uncle's warnings to only care for himself and survive at any cost. The prisoners were rounded up and walked many miles to the next camp, which became known as their first death march. They are now being moved to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. And then I wrote, quote, page 168. Oh my god. Sorry, family calls. Okay, but honestly, real time, I love my family, and I'm so grateful and thankful to be in the family that I am in, because my situation could be 1,000 times worse, and I would never dream of having the life I have now. So thank you, Mommy and Daddy. I love you so much, even though I don't ever tell you nearly enough. You need to hear it at least once on film, so you can't deny I said it, and neither can I. I love you guys, I'm grateful. Okay. Let's get back to the book for both of us start crying, okay? Okay. Okay, chapter 21 is where they were moved to the concentration camp, the Sachsenhausen one. It says, quote, page 168. Oh, right here, okay. Under the whips and clubs of the Kapos and the SS officers, we marched out through the front of Auschwitz. You come in through the front gate, but the only way you leave is through the chimney, the guards had told us when we arrived. Ha! Look at me now, I wanted to shout, walking out through the front gate the way I came in. I had survived the ghetto. I had survived Plazow and Wilexica. That's so hard to say, I'm so sorry. And Trebiznia and Birkenau, and now Auschwitz. I was going to survive it all. I was going to be alive when the Allies liberated us. This I swore. I cannot put into words how much I like this book. Chapter 22 just says, quote, page 182. Like, I put down the quote the pages and then I can't remember which page, what I wanted to quote on which page, because I do not like to write in books. All my notes were on paper and I threw them away when I typed them out. Oh, I guess I just wanted to talk about this because this is the part of the book where my bird's chirping at me, sorry. He wants to get taken out and it's too late, I'm not taking him out. I don't want to chase him down from the ceiling fan. Anyways, in this part, there's this boy that Yannick carried, like, the majority of the way to the next camp because the boy was, like, staggering. He didn't want him to get shot. And the boy was so sick, he thought he would die, and Yannick lost his chunk of bread they had given him in the way there. So he thought that if the boy died the next morning, he was going to take his bread. But since the boy didn't die, Yannick gets no food for 3 days. And then they get moved again in chapter 24. Let me skip ahead. I'm still in chapter 23. Chapter 24. They get moved to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. This is in 1945, so this is the beginning of the year when the war was about to come to an end. Ew, there's a hair in my mouth. Sorry. Ew. Chapter 25 is Buchenwald. Concentration camp, also 1945. Quote, page 213. Which is in chapter 26. I guess what I wanted to quote was this part. I don't remember. When the door to the train car finally opened at Gross-Rosen, our new concentration camp, bodies fell out. We left even more bodies in the cars. Those of us who had survived the trip, who had survived camp after camp after camp, shuffled into Gross-Rosen without fear or expectation. Nothing the Nazis could do could surprise any of us now. That's so sad, man. Alright. 27. Chapter 27, next chapter. This is their second death march, also in 1945. They got moved once again to Dachau. On their way to the camp, they noticed that the Czechs had started leaving food on the doorsteps. And then when they got more into town, people were leaning out their windows, throwing whatever food they could down to the Jews to help them out. And Yannick talks about how through all the stuff he had been through, that warmed his heart to know that there were still people out there that genuinely cared. Okay, chapter 28. So the only thing I noticed from this chapter is that the phrase, which was a small mercy, is used a lot, at least 3 times that I can remember off the top of my head. So let's move on to chapter 29, our last 2 chapters, and then we'll talk a little bit about the book. Dachau concentration camp is where chapter 29. So these last 2 chapters both take place in the same camp in Dachau in 1945, right as the war came to an end. The enemy bombing had started getting so much closer to the concentration camp until it eventually did hit the camp, and the Nazis fled during the night, leaving the Jews there by themselves. So in chapter 30, the next morning, the Jews woke up alone, and then they saw soldiers coming through the gate, and they're like, oh, this is it, they're gonna kill us all for getting out of our bunks without being told. But little did they know it was the Americans there to save the survivors. They were taken away to Munich. One thing I noticed that was a little sketchy was in the book, in one of the camps they were sent to, they were given food and no work for a week, so that they could regain their strength and then go straight back to work. And in that chapter, Yannick mentioned that the food they gave them was too rich, and then it made him sick, so he passed up his suit for bread. But in the end of the book, the soldiers gave them like meat, potatoes, and gravy, like a lot of heavy foods. But that food didn't make them sick. Sorry, my nose is trying to run. So it's a little uncanny that just a few days before, well, actually a few years before, that they had gotten this food and it made him sick, but all of a sudden he got this rich food and it didn't make him sick. In high school, in my history class, I learned that what they fed the survivors was rice. Rice was the only food that didn't make them sick and cause them to die. So, do I recommend this book? Yes, absolutely. I also recommend similar books like Sarah's Key by Tatiana de Rosnay, Boy in the Striped Pajamas, as mentioned before, and Schindler's List by Thomas Keneally. All these books revolve around the theme of the Holocaust and its repercussions. And I don't want to say that Hitler is my favorite person to learn about, even though he is, because that seems kind of like, what's wrong with her? But it's not so much learning about Hitler than it is thinking that these events so extreme should remain a piece of fiction, but they're not. Like, these events are things that actually happen to real people, and that just blows my mind. Something this outlandish and this inhumane actually happened in history. So, I'm gonna pick a new book to read. I might pick a little bit longer one, because I really uploaded these two videos like back to back, and that's kind of annoying. I know some people don't like such consistent uploads, especially with things like this where the videos tend to be a little on the longer side. So that's all I have about this book. I really do recommend it. It was a good book. It's an easy read. This one's tore up so much because I got it out of a free book box at work, at the school I work at. So if you want to read this book, I'm pretty sure you can buy it at like Barnes & Noble or Amazon. I'm going to include a picture of the guy that this story was based off of at the end. I'll try to get one of him as a kid and as an adult if I can find one of each. So I'm going to pick a new book, and then I'll see you guys in the next one. Okay, so I totally just remembered that I forgot to tell you what happens at the end of the book. So, after the Americans come and liberate the survivors, and they're taken to Munich, Jack learns that he has a cousin that's still alive in Krakow, so he goes to meet him, and he stays with them for a while, and then he changes his name to Jacob, the American spelling, so Jacob. And he moves to America, where he becomes a citizen in less than a year, and he lives the American dream he's always had. So I'm glad that he got his happy ending, because a lot of people didn't make it through this, and that breaks my heart. So I'm just glad he got his happy ending. And I think he's actually still alive. He died. He passed away, unfortunately. And he met this girl named Ruth, and they got married. And this article says 61 years later, Holocaust survivor and this isn't even the right article. Yes, I think he did pass away. Wait, why? He died April 6, 2017. Oh man. That's so sad. It sounds so disingenuous, but really that is sad. But I'm glad he made it out of there alive, because he got the ending not many people were fortunate to, and he took it and made the most of it by coming to America and following his dream. So that's what happened at the end. I really do like this book. I do recommend it. Please check it out. It's worth the read. Bye guys, for realsies this time.